Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Friday, February 13th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris, catching up on some news that slipped through over the course of the week and getting you caught up on a few things that have happened since we last dug into the headlines. Eno, the big story in baseball, at least as we record this on Thursday afternoon, is the release of Nick Castellanos, which we knew was coming, but the report from Matt Gelb of The Athletic explaining some more of the details as to how things soured so quickly is actually the surprise. And this actually goes back to an incident that occurred in June. Castellanos was lifted from a game in Miami with some family and friends in attendance for a defensive replacement. He was not happy about that, came back into the dugout with a beer, a Presidente to be specific, and proceeded to shout at his coaches and manager, Rob Thompson, in front of his teammates.
It's pretty wild. Castellanos admitted a lot of this on his own Instagram with a personally penned note. It was followed up by Matt Gelb with a piece on The Athletic. I have just a lot of thoughts here. I mean, one of the things that comes to mind, though, is that we've been talking about scouting makeup and, you know, what good makeup is. And, you know, I know that teammates like Nick Castellanos. I know that has sort of filtered through. And I know that there are fans who like Nick Castellanos because he kind of says it how it is. And, you know, because sometimes it's unfiltered and seems like an interesting guy. And yet there's obviously a problem here, right? I mean, it led to his release. It led to him, you know, apparently the Phillies had the choice of, you know, suspending him for having an open container of alcohol in the dugout during the games, which is a suspendable offense. They decided not to do that, swept it under the rug, and then started him for like 20 games after the incident. So there's a whole lot of stuff here about, like, if you're good enough, if they need you enough, they'll play you, they'll look past this stuff. But there's also just what is makeup is one of the underlying factors here. And I just wanted to read really quickly from Matt Gelb's piece. It's a really good piece. You should read it, this long one. But, you know, this part, for months, many of Castellanos' teammates had a running debate. They could not consider him a bad teammate because there were so many instances of Castellanos doing thoughtful things. He extended advice to younger players. He offered space in his home for call-ups if they needed it. He worked. He was level-headed on the field. He rushed to Ryan Kerkering's side in the aftermath of a season-ending mistake. But Castellanos, many of his teammates argued, was not a team player. That was an important distinction to make. His candor, appreciated by some, there was never any guessing about where Castellanos stood, was not for everyone. A team player, Philly sources said, would have understood that late-inning defensive substitutions were not necessarily an indictment of his abilities. The team had a better chance to win with a defensive upgrade. So, you know, I think in the end, do you think he'll get a job? Because this is an act of insubordination. There's some similarities between sort of the military and baseball in that there are lines that you do not cross. There are sort of levels of hierarchy, and, you know, he got in the dugout and was yelling at the manager in front of other players. What other manager is signing up for this and says, yes, I want him on my team? It is nice to see some contrition from him. He apologized, said he would learn from it. What do you think about Castellanos' ability to get another job?
Right. I think this is the kind of thing that it'll be remembered by a lot of folks, but I don't know if it will singularly define Nick Castellanos' career, if it's actually over at this point. You said something in that lead up, though, that I think is really important, just in the sense of whether or not a team's going to take a chance again. And that comes back to just what he has to offer as a big league player at this stage of his career. He's not the same guy he was when he signed that 5-year, $100 million deal before 2022, right? We're seeing a guy that was below replacement level last year, barely above it in 2024, below replacement level in the first year of the deal in 2022. So now he's a 34-year-old with very little, if any, defensive value, and projections that say the bat is below league average now too. So if you're just evaluating through that lens and looking at some of the recent first base DH types that found new homes, you know, he kind of stacks up with some of those guys. And then, of course, you have to decide how much this incident matters to you, and his assessment from a very veteran-filled clubhouse full of major leaguers that I think are generally respected around the league. I think that's a fair way to characterize the Phillies as a team, right? I mean, these are guys that you see representing Team USA in the World Baseball Classic and being sought out by younger players. So I think there's a very good chance no one picks him up. And it's not because that incident or even the series of events that transpired to lead the Phillies to just release him on Thursday, any of those things are insurmountable, but it's because you pair that with the player he's become, and it sounds like he's hard to reach. It sounds like he, among the things that Matt reported, has a very difficult time even considering things that people say if they did not play in the major leagues. And increasingly, that's a lot of staffers and managers and coaches and analysts. So I don't know. I can't in my head conjure up an immediate fit where somebody who's been with him before, had him as a teammate, maybe had him as a player, now is in a position to make that decision, would say, yeah, he brings enough to the table where we will go ahead and give him that next chance. So I do think this could very well be the end.
Yeah. It's important to bring up fit as well. You're right. As a right-handed DH type, I mean, he said he's available to playing first base, but that's taking a leap of faith unless you had him in camp. Maybe you could do him on a minor league level to see if he can play first base for you. If we're looking at left-handed, bottom half first baseman that could use a right-handed component. The Padres just signed Miguel Andujar, so that's where we might be talking. But Miguel Andujar, projects better and is younger and he's probably a better hitter at least. You're looking at Carlos Santana signed with the Diamondbacks, but he's already signed there. So the Rockies have Troy Johnston was a waiver claim and Blaine Crim there. Could they do that? But then the Rockies are also trying to build, right? So, there's going to be some young players coming through there. What do they feel like if we sign Nick Castellanos, but then we decide Charlie Condon is ready? How's that going to go down, right? Yeah, and so then I don't know, like the Marlins even have Christopher Morel there. And then DH, like at this point in the offseason, a righty DH, I don't know if you want a platoon DH if you think he has no defensive value. So, all that goes together to say, he might be a good person, as we talked about before we got on here, like, those things that he did, rushing to Ryan's side and opening his house to people, and some of the opinions he's had shows that he's a thoughtful person when it comes to being a human being. But there is something about this incident paired with his talent on the field that may make it tough. Like, we're looking at the possible, like Rhys Hoskins is still out there. We're talking about a right-handed, first baseman who has played first base before, who comes with none of this baggage, who is 32 to Castellanos is 32. He's a year younger than Castellanos, Rhys Hoskins is, and he projects to be above league average, while the best projection for Castellanos is 95 WRC+. So I have another question for you. Why hasn't Rhys Hoskins signed? What's going on with Rhys Hoskins? Like, is there something where his managers, his agent's looking for a full-time gig and he's only being offered, small platoon side? Why can't we find Rhys Hoskins a job?
I think when you look at the group of players, the first base DH veterans that have all landed jobs in the last week, you can kind of see how Rhys Hoskins fits in between them somewhere. So this group for me includes Marcell Ozuna, who got 1-12 from the Pirates, and it goes down as low as Carlos Santana, who got 1 year and $2 million from the Diamondbacks, who, reading some of Mike Hazen's comments, was brought in as much for veteran leadership, clubhouse presence as he was for what he can still do with the bat. Like, there's a very good chance Santana's a part-time player, and someone like Pavin Smith might actually play more than expected. Smith might be on the big side of platoon there. Paul Goldschmidt came back to the Yankees. I think it's 1 year, $4 million for him.
That deal is an obvious That's a small side platoon deal.
Right. Yeah, Ben Rice is the big side, Paul Goldschmidt's the small side. It's very clear by the money what they're expecting there. And I imagine Hoskins is still looking for something closer to Ozuna's number, and I'm not sure he's necessarily wrong because Rhys Hoskins had a fluky thumb injury last year. There was a throw that pulled him off the bag at first base. The runner came through, ran into his hand, hurt his thumb, went on the IL. It was actually the series of events that led to Andrew Vaughn getting promoted in July and doing Andrew Vaughn stuff in Milwaukee. Before that injury, Hoskins was hitting .242 with a .340 OBP, 12 homers, 41 RBIs, 27% K rate, 13% better than league average. Kind of your typical, this part of your career, good version of Rhys Hoskins, right? He only had 16 plate appearances after the injury, so he just never really got back. So my guess is that he's looking for an opportunity where he's an everyday guy or close to an everyday guy. There's only a handful of teams that are looking for a player like that, and they're just not aligning on money. But now that we've seen just about everybody else who could fit that type come off the board, maybe it's just waiting for an injury now. Maybe it's just waiting for someone to lose a player in camp for 4 to 6 weeks, and then they'll realize, oh, we need some right-handed power. So I think Rhys Hoskins still has something to offer. I actually think projections-wise, if you look at him compared to Ozuna, that's probably close to a coin flip. And with Ozuna, we've talked about it before, he's been suspended for a domestic violence offense in the past. So he's got that and still was able to find another opportunity. And with Hoskins, you have nothing like that you're taking into account. So I'm a little surprised Hoskins is still out there given the circumstances.
So according to the payroll on FanGraphs, the Colorado Rockies are about $4 million short of last year's number. I just keep coming back to them because Troy Johnston is a 28-year-old waiver claim that they got from the Marlins that projects to be way worse than league average. The best projection is a 98 WRC plus. That's worse than Hoskins' worst projection. He is a left-hander, so you could even keep him if you are excited about him. Blaine Krim is a 28-year-old righty with two options who also projects worse than Rhys Hoskins. So that's the only place Colorado, and it's interesting for like fantasy listeners, I think, because he might not have a job at all, or he might have the best job he could get. He either ends up in Colorado or I don't see it. I mean, the Marlins got, they signed Christopher Morel. They don't seem like the team that's going to sign Hoskins. The Diamondbacks got Santana. The Brewers seemingly have made this choice. Andrew Vaughn is their choice. The Padres, going upwards from the bottom of the first base thing. Padres took Andujar and Sheets. I mean, they could move Sheets to DH, but Andujar is a right-hander, so Luis Garcia Jr. for the Nationals is a left-hander. Do the Nationals want to sign Rhys Hoskins to babysit their kids? I mean, they just traded for Abimelech Ortiz. The Twins signed a switch hitter in Josh Bell. The Rangers have a right-hander in Jake Berger. I'm getting too close to the top. A platoon partner for Nolan Shanuel? That could happen.
Yeah, I guess. Again, that'd be less of a role than he's expecting, so then it comes down to dollars. And to be clear, I mean, we're talking about someone who's projected to be, about 5% better than league average by the more optimistic projections and at or slightly above by most of the other projection systems. So it's not a slam dunk at this point either. But I look at Hoskins as being good enough to be in some camp somewhere and still having something to offer for fantasy players if he lands in the right place. Whereas everybody else in this group, the only guy that I think is even fantasy relevant outside of mono leagues to begin the year is Ozuna, because that projection is bigger. It's like 15%, 20% better than league average, and we're still only one season removed from high 30s home run totals. Like he's not that far away from being that type of power hitter. So I get it as far as like why any team would go ahead and go down that path, and given their need for power, I understand why the Pirates were that team.
I guess I'll throw one more name on there where Rhys Hoskins could still be fantasy relevant next year, and I believe that is the Guardians. Right now at DH, they're listing George Valera and David Fry. They don't seem like the type of team to do this, but if it drops to 1-5 or something like that, they might just see enough value there, just like the Brewers have jumped on some short-term deals with guys like that in the past. So Guardians, Rockies, and I mean with the Angels, could he push Trout back into the outfield a little bit? I mean, maybe, but they have got Soler.
It's Soler. Yeah, it's hard to put Hoskins on the same roster as Soler when you have a first baseman who's going to play a lot in Shanuel.
And I think this is the difficulty with this entire market is just first base is one of those places where you can cobble it together, and there's very obviously teams that just decide to go cheap and platoon two guys. And then there are teams that, decide to have an everyday player. And there doesn't really seem to be a middle ground. This is happening across baseball in general. But, the middle ground in the first base territory is like Jorge Polanco, who projected better as a hitter, and they just moved him to first. That's the problem. Is it defensively is a place where you could be like, no, we'll sign this third baseman. We'll sign, like, maybe next year you could sign Eugenio Suarez for 1 and 8, and you'd prefer that over Hoskins maybe because whatever reason. So that's what part of the problem is. You're at the bottom of the defensive spectrum. There's no other place that anybody can sign you and put you.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think that's why these numbers come in as low as they do for players in this group, even guys that are going to project for an opportunity to be everyday guys like Ozuna seems to be projecting right now. But I think that's also part of what's going to make it difficult for Nick Castellanos to find a taker even at the league minimum or near the league minimum as teams are looking to upgrade their rosters here over the next few weeks. Some other news, kind of the secondary stuff that we've been keeping an eye on throughout the week. Because of the Francisco Lindor injury, which when we spoke, it was not clear that he was going to have surgery on his hamate, but it has been since revealed that he will. So he's in the exact same situation as Jackson Holliday, the exact same situation as Corbin Carroll, where opening day is very much up in the air and trying to get back to 100% once he returns is going to be a lingering concern. The Mets may have to start Ronny Mauricio at shortstop on opening day because their plan right now is to keep Bo Bichette at third, let him keep getting reps there and not mess around with that sort of adjustment. And I think this is interesting just because Ronny Mauricio is in the group of players that I described on the Thursday episode where because of injuries and different factors, he's graduated from prospect lists, but he still hasn't had a lot of opportunities in the big leagues. 87 games, so about a half season's worth of plate appearances. And the hype is pretty much all gone. But there may still be a pretty interesting player here. I mean, you go back to what he did before he hurt himself. In 2023, hit 23 homers and stole 24 bases at AAA over 116 games. He's just had a hard time getting back from that ACL injury, and we finally saw him for 61 games last year. So even though it was underwhelming at the plate, I'm actually kind of intrigued by Ronny Mauricio getting even just a short-term opportunity with the Mets as they bring Lindor back in the early weeks of the season.
He's also kind of fascinating because he's a slow, good shortstop. I mean, that's what the numbers say, at least. He's stolen bases in the minors, but last year he had a 13th percentile foot speed. Now we have, been talking about how that might be a flawed stat. Maybe he doesn't hustle, but then he doesn't hustle as a rookie. That's still a bit weird. You think these guys would be running all out. So he's got good bat speed. Otherwise, he's got a good arm strength. And if they just want to set Bo Bichette at third and forget it, then they can do that. I also made a joke about this, but if you put Bo Bichette at short and Mark Vientos at third, you're in trouble. If you put Bo Bichette at third and Brett Beatty, Bo Bichette at second and short and Brett Beatty at third, you're still not very good on the left. That'd still be bottom 5 defensively on the left, and then you wouldn't have a left fielder unless Benj is given the left field job. There's a fair amount here in this Mets depth chart that's unsettled, frankly. I mean, it's just like, is Jorge Polanco going to be a good first baseman? If not, is Vientos going to be the first baseman and Polanco the DH? Who's going to fill in at short? Where is Brett Beatty going to play? I think there's a lot here that's pretty interesting for a team that was trying to upgrade its defense. It looks like it's going to be pretty bad defensively going into the season, honestly.
Well, I think that's the sad part of these top-end guys all suffering these hamate injuries to begin the season, too, is like they're all playing pretty important defensive spots where you don't necessarily have a backup that you love because you expect to play them every single day. And in the D-backs case, they're going to maybe move Alek Thomas from center to right and put Jordan Lawlar in center, which is good for the let's let Jordan Lawlar play crowd. Like I'm in that group, and I'm the one saying let's just see what happens. They may need him to play some left field at some point, even after they get Carroll back, if Thomas slides back over to center. So I just think Jordan Lawlar has become pretty interesting as a result of the unfortunate Corbin Carroll injury, just as Ronny Mauricio is becoming a little bit more interesting for deeper leagues as the guy that could pick up some extra playing time. Again, it might only be for a couple of weeks because the timetables line up where all of these hamate removal surgeries, other than Holiday, who's already been reported to begin the year on the IL, all of them are still possible for opening day with still 6 weeks to go.
I know we were all waiting for Tim Tawa's dad to weigh in, but Tim Tawa's dad, I got on social media today and said, don't worry about it. Corbin Carroll will be back in there for opening day. This is just a pain tolerance thing, and he'll be fine. So according to Tim Tawa's dad, Corbin Carroll's going to be there on opening day. And I don't know if you want to take that to the bank when it comes to your next, I can't tell you where to take Corbin Carroll. You know, we talked about this a little bit in flying by. Like, I don't know what the fantasy implications are, because if you've looked at the past, there are people who have suffered. Their power has suffered. There are other people who have not. Their isolated slugging has not suffered. I've looked into this. Other people looked into this. It's hard to have a takeaway, and so it's really unique to each individual. I could see Carroll, like I was saying, he's a leader. He wants to be out there on the field. I could see him being out there, his power suffering for the first month or so, and then him actually having a pseudo-vintage season by the end of the season, just maybe a few homers short, in which case you should not let him drop until the third round or something. You know what I mean? He's still, like, what is he if he's a... have they dropped the projections a little bit? Nobody's really dropped the projections yet, but let's say he hits 22 homers and steals 35 bags and has a 260 average. So in 2024, when he put up numbers just like that, Corbin Carroll was the sixth best outfielder. And that's probably his floor. I mean, we've acknowledged that there's been growth in his power since then. So, and he hit 230 that year. So, sixth best outfielder is his floor. Don't let him drop too long.
In the soon-to-be or recently released Derek's top hitter rankings on The Athletic, you'll likely see, because this is where they are at the time of the recording, you'll likely see Carroll and Lindor next to each other just behind Jackson Chourio and Trey Turner. So that would put him late second round of a 15-teamer, ahead of James Wood, ahead of Jazz Chisholm Jr., because when you described Carroll, that's basically what Jazz Chisholm Jr. is projected for with a lower average, like 260, low 20s homers, and 30 steals. So if you're assuming not much missed time and a little more speed, a little less power, that's still a really good foundational early round player. So I think for me, it's like Trey Turner's a little underrated. The more I've dug into some of the early round players, like I'm happy to just get him if I land in that particular draft slot. And then you get down to Wood, who I think has just an enormous ceiling, but there's still some uncertainty as to how quickly he's going to get there. And Chisholm, who's had a really hard time staying healthy for full seasons and brings that sort of batting average downside to the table, which is hard to stomach. And then Pete Crow Armstrong. I have those guys all sort of lumped together. And I think the skills uncertainty, for different reasons, and health uncertainty. Yeah,
like Wood gives me the willies.
Wood, Chisholm, and PCA. I'm like, I could kind of see any one of them being exciting. Top 10 players, but I could also see them falling and being like fourth or fifth rounders in terms of what they actually give you back. I'd rather take Carroll and Lindor, based on what we know right now, over them, but it's very close. And if you want to say, give me the healthier guys, just skip right on by and let somebody else do it. I don't think it's going to be a crazy discount where they fall 3 or 4 rounds. It's going to be like one full round of ADP for the next few weeks.
Remember what Derek just said about his hitter ranks, and we're going to talk about my pitcher ranks in a second in the mailbag, and I'm going to say something similar. So remember, he put the veteran hurt guys together, and they represented a bit of a tier.
Oh, yeah.
So a little bit of a tier break there.
I draw tier breaks with players. If you see a glob of similar players together there, that's for a reason. That's to like draw like this. There's a cutoff here, so I think you're getting more at or above that level, and you're taking a little less if you decide to go around it. But there's a clear like, you got to make a choice here, sort of pivot point.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that a little bit later. Some of the news that we missed, we could frankly just miss it. I mean, we did talk about how Nick Martinez signed with the Rays, and in fact, I think that raises to the level of being interesting, but maybe more interesting for the fact that, as we mentioned, that might push Joe Boyle and Ian Seymour out of the rotation. I don't see Nick Martinez as someone who has not been optimized. He has a great changeup, the Vulcan changeup that he throws. He has some similarities to Michael Wacha in that he has this great changeup and he's put pitches around it with command. I think that they just saw him as given innings, as veteran innings that at a certain price that they could accept. They've done this before with like Zach Littell and other low ceiling guys that they didn't necessarily turn into anything much better. They just, gave them a role and got what they needed to out of them. It was good for the money. I don't have anything circled where I was like, oh, if Nick Martinez just did this, he's pushed all the dials. He throws 8,000 pitches types, and he has good command and he has a great out pitch. There's no more dials that I see to twiddle on Nick Martinez at 35 years old. And then you have like Jordan Montgomery signed to the Rangers. He's rehabbing. It's possible that in the second half, I'm actually, the thing that's most surprising to me about that news is that there was the whole thing about that was with the Diamondbacks, that the owner was so mad that they signed Jordan Montgomery.
Right. That was his idea.
Yeah, but I thought that was with the Rangers. No, it was the Diamondbacks owner that was so mad. I was like, wait, did he just sign with a team where the owner hated him? No.
He'll never go back to Arizona. You could safely cross that off for all future free agent predictions. Jordan Montgomery will not go back to the Diamondbacks.
But they are just trying to kill my boy Jacob Latz's sleeper value. I have to move Latz down a little bit with each of these news items that the Rangers do, but I still think Latz wins the job out of spring. And if Jordan Montgomery is rehabbing his way back, there's a lot of ifs for him to get in there, right? It's like other people have to get hurt and he has to be good and he has to not be a reliever and so all that stuff. What do you think Aaron Savali's role with the Athletics is?
Innings eater? I mean,
like similar to Martinez or whatever, just a guy?
I think the difference is, though, Sutter Health is such a tough place to pitch where I can't even get behind Aaron Savali as more than a 45th or later round pick in a 15-teamer. So, like, even for our listener league, I don't even know if Savali's draftable because that's a 12-team league with 50 rounds. Nick Martinez is very draftable in that. Nick Martinez is at least useful. I think he's actually low-key, like, kind of a nice late option. Like, very late.
You could use him at home. I mean, the nice thing about the Trop is it suppresses offense and all your pitches play exactly as you planned them to play. The not nice thing about Sacramento, neither of those things is true.
Right.
There's a crosswind. Your pitches don't play the way you're supposed to, and they go blasted out of the park. So you'd have to play Savali 20% of the time at most in any league you took him. Like sometimes on the road. That's a tough one.
Yeah, just a frustrating player for a long time because there's flashes where it looks like he could turn a corner. He's got the deep arsenal, but more often than not, you make the mistake. You try to play the matchups with him. He gets hit when he shouldn't, and it just doesn't work out for you. Some other smaller things. Jose Quintana goes to the Rockies. Obviously, he can't use him there. Also, just veteran innings eater alongside Tomoyuki Sagano now as the Rockies just try to find some guys to get them through the season.
Yeah, Quintana's numbers have been okay, despite a rapidly declining strikeout minus walk total. I mean, he's been a guy who's been kind of a model beater for a while. The model he has to beat now is just even harder and harder. You know what I mean? He used to like have a 3.6 ERA against a 4.1 FIP, and now it's like projected 4.9 FIP. It's like, okay, you have to beat the model pretty hard there for me to want to use you. So I love his career. I love his stuff. And I'm so sorry it had to end this way. I'm really interested to see what they do with the old guys. I don't know if they're going to do any better than they did with the young guys. One of the next items I wrote, never mind next to.
Yeah, but MJ Melendez is a Met now. You don't care?
It's a deep cut. It's a deep cut for the longtime listeners of this pod who know that there might have been a 2 or 3 year stretch where MJ Melendez was on my sleeper list every year. So I gave up on that when for 3 straight years he was the same guy, which is to say, not great. I mean, just really poor. One of the things I think that he points to in my analysis is, you can't forget that WAR actually matters. We don't play in wins above replacement leagues, but the teams care. And if you're projecting playing time, why did he never get a full slate of playing time? He got close one year. He had a .4 WAR the year that he was allowed to play almost every day because his defense was so poor and his offense was below average that there wasn't a reason to put him out there. Now, there might be a reason to put him out there in New York if it's just, well, we're doing this for the short term. But I don't think he plays his way. I think he's a guy who's up and down for them. He has an option. They put him on there. He's depth to me. I don't even it's possible that he's there opening day, but what's the over under on plate appearances for him? I think it's like 130.
I was going to say 150. Yeah, probably not much more than that, barring some major injury changes to that depth chart between now and the start of the season. 2 veteran relievers are back in familiar places. Paul Sewald is back with the Diamondbacks. Liam Hendriks goes back to, I believe, where his big league career started in Minnesota. Either of those guys, given the state of those respective bullpens, moving up for you as very, very late save darts.
My problem with Sewald, it was 90.4 miles an hour last year. If I had the choice as a manager between that and Cade Stroud, who's high 90s with crazy spin and just a little bit of wildness, I don't know. I would definitely just go with the big velo. I don't know. Maybe that's my bias. I just can't imagine running a 90-mile-an-hour closer out there these days. Hendricks, I want to see what the velo is. I just don't think that we've got a good sense of where his stuff is. There's been so many injuries and so much that he's had to overcome, and I'm glad that he's overcome those things and he's healthy again. That is a really bad bullpen where we've decided that it might be just a miss in a lot of leagues. Early on, Corey Funderburk, I was worried that, back to the Sewald thing, I was worried that Funderburk at 92.5, 93 miles an hour didn't have enough velo to be put out there as the closer. So, and I probably was right because they went and got Rogers. But Rogers, Funderburk, Sands, could Hendricks overleap that group? Yes, actually. I think he could, especially if he comes into camp and he's 96, 97.
Yeah, I would say it's the pair of eyes emoji, which is my most used emoji. I'm trying to keep some eyes on it. I think it'd be a great story if Liam Hendriks could get it back and become a ninth inning option again. But it's a long road because of all the injuries that he has been through. Sewald, anything's possible, but I don't think I've moved him into the position where I'm actually drafting him anywhere just yet. Also a wait and see for me. Last thing that kind of slipped through news-wise that did catch my attention, and I threw it on the rundown, is Agustín Ramírez working on his defense. There's a story from Jordan McPherson of the Miami Herald detailing all the things that Ramírez has done, and they're going to give him another chance behind the plate. We were pretty harsh about Ramírez's defense, at least I was, during the catcher preview a couple of weeks back, and Ramírez said he worked on improving his mobility this offseason so he can better block pitches in the dirt and improve his range. He also said improving the mental aspect of the game on both sides of the ball, anticipating plays, understanding his pitcher's tendencies, knowing when to swing was paramount. Anyway, nothing in particular in that quote is critically important, but I think what I needed to acknowledge is just that it's hard for any young player to break in and hit big league pitching, and he hit it at first, kind of hit a wall in the second half, while also being a big league catcher. And we know the Marlins are one of those teams that are going to do things a little bit differently, maybe calling pitches from the dugout again. We saw that at the end of last season. If they're giving him an opportunity and letting him have some runway, anything's possible. He could become passable defensively. They may not care about his shortcomings defensively this year to the point where it might not hurt him that much fantasy-wise.
And he might be coming along just at the right time, because if ABS is going to reduce the amount of framing he has to do, he was, as we pointed out, average-ish when it came to framing. If they're going to, enforce the first base boxes more and enforce, some of the stolen base rules more, maybe that'll help him. And if they're going to call pitches for him, then they've taken some of that stuff off his plate. and he can focus more on just, hey, can I make this transition better? Can I throw them out better because I'm a decent framer and I'm a decent hitter? So I think he could come out of this as better than Joe Mack. I know that everyone's like, oh, Joe Mack, but like, how many times has prospects not turned out to be as good as we expected them to be? So I think that was a good thing to point out. It's good to bring this up again, is to be like, yeah, you can sometimes be too hard on a guy's faults and realize that was just his first try.
His first try, and he and the team knew it was a problem, and they had a plan to work on it throughout the offseason. I think Clayton McCullough, the manager, went down and visited him at their facility in the Dominican Republic, and I don't know, I got the sense that they're going to give him a pretty good window before Joe Mack is really pushing him for a ton of that playing time behind the plate. So if you have questions about Ramírez, it's more about what happened with his bat over the course of the year and less about how the playing time is going to shake out, at least to begin the year. Still a lofty price, but I'm a tinge more optimistic about him finding a way to make it work for another year than I was a few weeks ago. We put out the call for the request line in our Discord, looking for questions about pitchers we didn't cover over the course of our 4 pitching previews, or any mailbag questions at all. So we've got a few of those to get to. First one comes from Carrot. A lot of people are looking at the Stuff Plus model right now. Carrot wants to know what to make of guys with higher pitching plus numbers than both Stuff Plus and Location Plus numbers. How does that happen?
Yeah, some of his examples were instructive, actually, because he points out that like Skeens has a 120 pitching against 110 Stuff, 111 Location. I think these are old model numbers, but it's fine. It still illustrates it. Spencer Strider, however, has a 90 pitching plus on a 95 Stuff plus, 95 Location plus. And I think one of the things that, well, I'll get to why I think those are instructive, but what I'll tell you is, it's not Stuff plus Location divided by 2 or whatever. What pitching plus is, it's a third model that takes all of the features of the other 2 models and puts them back together and uses machine learning to look at the different relationships that they can have. So it's basically like saying, let's take all the Stuff features and the Location features, throw them together in one model. And so what you end up getting is pitching plus is slightly more predictive than Stuff plus, but only slightly more. And what you'd lose is year-to-year stickiness, because now you put Location in, and Location plus as a model describes a lot of what has happened, but is very bad at predicting the future. And we know this because pitchers miss their locations by a lot. And so it's not good to depend on somebody who's succeeded by mostly throwing to good locations, because that is a hard to replicate skill. So you dirty up the model a little bit by putting locations back in. However, what you gain is a more holistic sense of the entire arsenal when it comes to what can he command against each side. So let's go back to the answers. Spencer Strider, 90 pitching on 95-95. What is he? Mostly 2-pitch pitcher. What does he throw? Fastball, slider. What he might have a little bit of a problem with? Left-handers. He's got Robbie Ray on here, 96 against 100 Stuff plus 97. Similar thing. That's a fastball, slider, lefty, right? And so why pitching plus might be a little bit more predictive than Stuff plus. Once you get to 500 pitches, you have to wait longer because it has Location plus in it. The Location plus takes longer. Why it might be slightly more predictive is it might be catching more arsenal effects. It catches more of like, is this an arsenal that'll work? That's why I report Stuff plus numbers, more breathlessly when it comes to a debut or whatever, because Stuff plus can be relevant in like 75 pitches. So they can throw one game and I can say something about the guy, and then, 4 starts in, I can start to say something, but 4 or 5 starts in, K minus BB matters too. So that's why I don't cite pitching plus as much, but it should be on the menu. It can tell you something, particularly I think when it comes to starters. Relievers, if you have a problem against lefties or righties, sometimes the manager figures that out for you, and usage figures that out for you, and so it's not as meaningful. But pitching plus, yeah, for starters, it is worth looking at, especially starters who've more than 5 or 6 starts in the major leagues.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that question, Carrot. You mentioned on the menu. I think we had a question come in. This comes in every so often. What is on our FanGraphs dashboards? Like, you can customize the pages at FanGraphs to your liking. What have you got on yours right now? Let's start on the hitter side. What matters for you?
Yeah, I've got most of the I got the fantasy stats on there, OBP, slugging, most of the regular stuff, but the more interesting stuff, I have pull, ground ball, fly ball, hard hit, barrel, max EV, swing, and zone swing. The only real difference from the last time we talked about this is I've added zone swing because we've sort of made the revelation over time that, how often you chase outside the zone needs to be put in hand with how often you swing at pitches inside the zone. Because if you are aggressive inside the zone and aggressive outside the zone and have a good hit tool, you can be a good player, at least before the age of 30. And then if you are a overly patient player and don't swing at pitches inside the zone, even if you have a good chase rate, it can be not such a great approach. So Z swing, I would like to replace max EV with EV 90, which is 90th percentile exit velocity. And I believe that I will be able to do that soon on FanGraphs. I've seen it somewhere where I was trying to make a custom leaderboard. So once I can do that, I'll have to recalibrate because I know what a good max EV is. And so I'll have to recalibrate and learn it all again. But EV90 is maybe slightly better because there's some misreads at the very top and just some fluke hits where, does Cole Young's, 113 max EV, how much does that mean? Maybe his EV90 means more. So I would like to get EV90 on there, but that gives me an idea of how much they pull, if they hit the ball in the air, how hard they hit it generally, if they hit it hard in the air or not, and what their plate discipline is. I have swinging strike rate on there. I want to know, a little bit about their contact too.
Yeah, I don't have swinging strike on mine, but I do have, I got a lot of the same stuff as you might expect, right? I've got chase, I've got barrel, I've got hard hit. I still use BABIP. I use BABIP alongside home run to fly ball and then fly ball, line drive, ground ball breakdowns because I am trying to create a profile of what's happening with the batted balls. Can something be adjusted to make this batted ball data pop more, or has everything, at least on the broad level, been optimized already? EV90, you're right, would probably be a really nice addition to have. Maybe I'd put that in instead of hard hit. That might be the toggle to think about. But
yeah, because we've been talking about the limitations of hard hit where balls at 95 miles per hour aren't that great. I think that Tom Tango would just retort that people that hit the ball regularly over 95 are good.
Right.
So
it's kind of why I put it on there in the first place. Like, this seems like a good skill, and if I'm pairing it with the other skills, like how little do you strike out and how often do you lift the ball, I can sort of put the pieces together in my head to know if it's working or not.
Yeah. There's a adjusted exit velocity number somewhere on the pages of Savant, which just takes everything under like 60 or 70 miles per hour out because that's just a mishit. It's just a squib hit, and it's not useful to telling you anything. I have a feeling that as bat speed and some of these things come out, we'll put some of those things on our dashboard too. At least I will. Because I think there's just a shortcut in small samples to get to hard hit and barrel rate. It's a quicker way, if we've got a debut. In the same way that Stuff Plus is a shortcut to K-BB and Sierra and stuff like that. When you've got a debut, sometimes you need to look at something when you've only seen the guy for 5 games.
Yeah, I use on pitching pages, I have the Stuff Plus module across the top, right? There's the 3 things you can customize where I use the quick look prospect reports. I leave that thing alone. That's the first one. The roster resource box is my middle box, and then the Stuff Plus breakdown is my third box for the different squares you can customize, and then the actual stat lines for pitching for me. I have Sierra, K and BB percentage, swinging strike rate, zone contact percentage, CSW. I still have hard hit percentage on there. I'm not really sure why. I could probably take that off. And then the same batted ball distribution, fly balls, line drives, ground balls. I just want to know what kinds of contact is this pitcher giving up, BABIP, and then left on base percentage, using those two just to see if something's really high or really low or off of a career number. Because I just want to know if something weird was happening while everything else was the same. That does happen from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, left on base percentage and BABIP are
cornerstones for projection systems. They're in Sierra, they're in all the projection systems. Those things really tend towards league average. The longer you're around as a player, the more your own personal left on base percentage matters than the league one. But that's easy enough to see. Like if I'm looking at Bassett, he has a 75.9 across his whole career in terms of left on base. If I want to use that instead of the league number, which is sort of 71, 72, I can use that. You can see the projection systems have him more at 70, but Zip says 73. So Zip says, I'm going to use his personal baseline more because Zips, as we know, uses player comps to project players. So it's looking at other players that are like Bassett and projecting them to him to age like those players that are like Bassett. Whereas Steamer and stuff is more like, if you had a 75, left on base, what would you have going forward? Not that doesn't care as much about other players that are like him, if that makes sense. So there's, Jordan Rosenblum, if you're interested in talk like that, he talked about Oopsie in similar terms. You can, however, I would like to point out on FanGraphs, have 6 player modules at the top.
Yes, I know, Mr. I have 4 screens open and 3 different browsers. I try to manage my life in a way where all the data I actually can consume at once is there. So I try to be a little more efficient with the number of things I'm using. Now I get it.
Wonder,
you can have a second row if you want it.
If I cut it from 6, I think the things I look at the most. Well, you know what I look at? If you're listening right now, think of something that might be surprising that I look at the most in those things, and
innings pitched.
The one with the MLB options on it. The roster resource one that tells you how many options you have left.
That's why it's in my 3, man. Like it's really important.
I have the player rater. I think that's super interesting to see the shape of a person's season, but also if you hear us say something like he was the 74th best pitcher last year, that's shorthand for what the player rater is saying on there, which is usually 15 teams. So I understand that is very specific to a certain thing, but it also gives you a baseline. And I'm not sure if you can change what your player rater stuff is, or if you can change the size of your league, but at least you can see, in 15-team leagues, Chris Bassett last year was the 74th best pitcher. That's useful. That's like, okay, now I know if he pitches to a 4 ERA and 170 innings with a bad whip, I can still get a top 75 pitcher out of it. Okay, now I know what I'm talking about. So I like the player rater one. I have the quick look. It has projections in it. I don't think I look at it very much, so maybe I could get rid of that one. I like the news one. There's a news one that has like a little RotoWire news at the top and also the most recent stories. And it looks like I have quick look twice, so I really could maybe get it down to 3. But I do want to give a shout out to the stuff one because we get this question a lot. 100 is the average pitch across baseball. So you put all the pitches together, 100 is the average pitch. However, the model thinks that not all pitches are equal. And so the average slider is above 100. The average changeup is slightly below 100. The average cutter is below 100. And what's nice about having the stuff module on the top of your FanGraphs page, by the way, you can do this by just having an account. I don't think you have to pay. You just have an account, and then you have settings, and then you can, in the settings, you can customize your dashboard. The Stuff Plus module on that page shows you what averages. There's a black line that shows you what averages for each pitch type. And I just think it's an elegant way to look at his pitches. And so I can look at Chris Bassett right now really quickly and say, oh, he has like 4 average pitches and 2 more that are okay. So I know what kind of pitcher he is. He has a 101 location plus. He's a wide arsenal with okay pitches. He doesn't have a great out pitch, and that's why his strikeout rate wasn't great last year. I like all that. So, and I think I have very many of the same things. I do have called strike percentage. Was it called swinging strike percentage? CSW?
Yeah, called strikes and whiffs. Yeah.
Yeah. I forget what good is, though. Is 30 good? 30 is good, I think.
I think 30 is very good, yeah.
Yeah, so Bassett's 27 for his career, 27 recently. He's not that great there. I have velocity because I just think I want to know where his velocity is going. And then I have the stuff module down there too, because what I like about having the stuff on the player page is I can see it over time at the top.
Yeah, nice to see those changes over time. Always a good question. Thank you for sending that in. I forget who sent it in this time, but I know it's been sent many times before. Couple more questions to get to. Let's do kind of a lightning round when we get to the players. But the last non-player specific question was a request for you to highlight where the teardrops are in your pitcher rankings.
Again, my bias is on my sleeve. 15-team leagues, it's like I see it so much through NFC, and I try not to. I try to tell you my biases and tell you what's... But I will say this. I think there's a top six. Tarek Skubal, Paul Skeens, Garrett Crochet, Yamamoto, Sanchez, and Brown. After that six, you've got questions. I love Max Fried, but he has projected for 23% strikeout rate. I love Logan Gilbert, but he was hurt last year. Brian Wu, I don't believe his health grade that I have here. Chris Sale, hurt often. Hunter Green, hurt last year. Cole Reagan's hurt, right? So I think there's a top six. If you want to spend on a starting pitcher and get a stud, I say you get the top six. If you don't, wait. So I think there's a tier there, 6. Now, I also have, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Like you said about Francisco Lindor and Corbin Carroll. So I have a little tier here. Ohtani, Snell, Rasmussen, Glasnow. They're all from 20 to 25.
I know what you're doing. Right there. You're just putting them all together because you don't want to deal with it. You don't want to deal with separating them out into the mat. You're like, but if I just put injury that hits a threshold that I'm worried about and I just smash it all together, I can just say, I don't like any of these guys and I can go around them.
Yeah, right.
Or I can get one if one falls. You build in the cop-out.
It's a built-in cop-out, you're right. But I'm juggling in the fact that some of these people have injury list slots that are using my rankings. So, like, hey, man, like, if you have an injury list slot, take Blake Snell. Like, it's a decent, especially number 2, like 10-team injury list. Yeah, take Blake Snell as your number 2. It's great when he's in there. But that represents a tier for me, too. So I think there's a 6 and a 20. And so that to me is like 6 is an ace's ace. And then the next 14 are like back end ones, depending on the depth of your leaf, back end ones, high end 2s, or, good high pitchers. Right. And then there's that injury tier in the 20s. And so, I kind of think from 20 to 60 is a tier. Maybe that's too large. That's why I'm laughing, and I'm not sure how to answer this, because between 20 to 60, I was always like, ooh, I could put him. After 60, you're like, I hope this guy's good, or I'm going to use this guy at home, or maybe he'd be healthy to start the season. You know what I mean? Like, it's way like you're just hoping, a lot more. So 60 is another tier break. I did look again, and I found some injuries. Wheeler, Lodolo, and Ed Cab are around 40. So if you want to say 6, 20, 40, 60, I think that's about right.
All right. There you go. So you got some tiers that are kind of built in there, even if they're not flagged as such on the actual rankings. Now you know. If you listen to the show, you watch the show, you know where Eno has those blocks as he's putting those lists together.
And I guess one last thing I would say is, I do some tiers a little bit thinking about like where people are going to be looking for sleepers in the rankings and what their depth is. So I realized that the last pitcher in a 12-team league is going to be around the 80s. And so if you look at my rankings, you'll see in the 80s a bunch of less like a Jacob Latz type, right? Like might still be in the 80s. And they're like, does he have a job? I'm like, yo, if you're in a 12-team league, Jacob Latz is your last pitcher. Yay. Like I approve, And then I have another one of those in the like 110s, like the 100 to 110s, where that'd be more like a 15-team final pitcher, so I have little pockets of sleepers as well.
All right. There we have it. Let's get to the request line. We're going to go pretty quick on these because there's not a lot of time left in this episode. We're looking for thoughts on Zach Eflin this season,
I don't know. I mean, there's injury concern and there's a production concern. Well, like I've said before, I don't love putting the two together. The model doesn't really like any of his pitches, but he has a wide arsenal and he can command them. And if his back is okay, he's all right. But I would say What's your use for Eflin? Like where would you take him?
Draft and hold in mono league. Otherwise, he's a streamer
what?
for 2-start. Like
As innings?
8th pitcher. Like, I mean, like,
As innings? Like you're like, these are innings?
Yeah, I think the quality of the innings will be fine. Ratios and wins, but 16% K rate last year. It's like really bottoming out. I think he gets back to like 19, 20%. Projections say 18. So really deep leagues is mostly the appeal. I think it's part of the reason why they brought in Bassett. Eflin's not as reliable right now as he was the previous 2 seasons.
I think he could even lose his job. And we were talking about do they go to a 6-man to get Kramer in? And if they are really excited about Povich, could Eflin go to the pen or maybe somebody doesn't make it to opening day on one piece. But Eflin is, Eflin versus Kramer for a rotation spot. I'm not sure which one I pick. And they really did say some nice things about Cade Povich, so I have no idea what their decision-making process is there. The rest of that question was, how do you look at, Justin Steele versus Gerrit Cole? And one easy way to look at it is to downgrade any returners based on how much they pitched last year. I know that's a little bit weird to say, but like, if they pitched last year, they're going to be later, right? They had their surgery later, and so they're going to give you fewer innings. Steele had 25 innings last year, and Cole had 0. So I know that it's a weird way to say it, but I'm going to take Gerrit Cole there. Also, Gerrit Cole was, I think, a better pitcher than Justin Steele before he went down. So that's a pretty easy one for me, is Gerrit Cole there.
Yeah, if you're taking that stash, I'd also prefer Cole. I think you're right to have the timeline being a little bit different, a little bit longer for Justin Steele, at least based on what we know right now. I feel like Cole's just got more room for error, like more margin for error with his stuff not coming all the way back right away than Steele does. I feel like Steele already was closer to that sort of shelf. Got some requests here for some really deep cuts. Foster Griffin, Jacob Lopez, and Didier Fuentes. I know Jacob Lopez is a little bit behind the A's other pitchers. I saw Martin Gallegos had a notebook that went up on Thursday. Lopez had a forearm strain, I think it was, at the end of last season that put him on the IL. So I don't think it's a major problem, but it's just enough to where you're probably throwing that last pitcher dart elsewhere in leagues where you'd be thinking about Lopez for a role like that. And I say that as someone that actually was embracing Lopez as someone that could figure it out in Sacramento last year. We talked about the park and how difficult it is to stream there, so I think I'd be looking somewhere else for that roster spot based on what we know at the time.
Yeah, it's hard to get behind any of these for really productive fantasy innings this year. I think the most innings you'll get is Jacob Lopez out of the group, although Foster Griffin might just be there to soak up innings for his team. The thing I'm worried about with Foster Griffin is supposedly by reports he was 90 to 91 in Japan. I know he's a lefty with 5 pitches and some polish. I mean, those are really small walk numbers. So, like, could we get like a Bubic, Cameron type season out of him? Yes. However, I mean, you're guessing more. I'd rather have Bubic than Cameron, and also Bubic throws like 93, so it's not 90. And Cameron, do we want to like model? Do we want a bunch of Camerons or do we want just one Cameron? I guess you could take a shot on him. I think where I've seen him in draft and holds, I'm okay with Foster Griffin. I don't have any shares, but I mean, what do you have any ADP you're looking at? I know it's really late
for Griffin. Foster Griffin, I think, is going outside the top 475 in all drafts. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty late.
That's okay. You can take him there.
Yeah, it's really draft and hold only, and I think you're right. It's because they need 5 somebodies to soak up some innings there. I mean, Cade Cavalli is interesting, like we talked about, but I think that could be a revolving door. Like Brad Lord's going to get a lot of opportunity. Like there's just a lot of chances for someone to just emerge in Washington.
Okay, so this next one's going to hurt me in our listener league, but mostly draft and hold season is over for me. I've been keeping this one secret. I am 4 for 4 in all of my draft and holds with this next one. He is the inspiration for Lodem. Anybody listening, do you know yet who we're talking about? He's a lefty. He does not have any pitches that really score that well. His breaking balls are okay, but his fastballs are bad. He pitches in a pitcher's park. His name is Matthew Liberatore. Come on down. Yes, I have in every league I've drafted so far this year, I have Matthew Liberatore. And it's not as much about him as it is about what he represents. He's an opening day starter on a team that plays in a pitcher's park, and he goes in the 30th round. I love that combo, dude. He has been, like, him and Landon Roop have gone in the 30th and 31st and 32nd. I think I might be 4 for 4 on both of them. And I just love that combination because they both are bench pitchers for me. And it's just really nice to be like, oh, I'm going to have a pitcher in a pitcher's park this week. I'm going to have a starting pitcher in a pitcher's park this week. That's how I feel about them. Between the two of them, if I get both of them, I'm always going to have that. And that's going to be super helpful as my guys get injured. And the only problem is that I've already moved Liberatore into the starting rotation full stop on 2 of those leagues, I think, because of some injuries that have happened so far this spring. So, yay.
I can't believe you have that much Liberatore, but hey, it happens, Desperate times call for desperate measures, building out those gigantic rosters for draft and hold season. Didier Fuentes keeps coming up in our conversations, and I keep looking for updates, and I have not seen anything yet. Is he throwing? Is he on the same schedule as the other Atlanta starters right now?
Yeah, and I think the Stuffless model was the update wasn't as good on it. Like, I know he really popped in it. He's got a good sweeper, a good fastball, and about an average curveball, and couldn't locate any of them. So I would just consider him a high stuff, low command, low innings guy for this year.
Yeah, they may need to rely on him more than expected, though, with that Schwellenbach injury from earlier in the week. One more request to get to before we go. I think Eno's voice is pretty much shot.
It's going. I don't know. Too much talking today.
Randy Vasquez. Most notably, how much regression should we expect? His underlying numbers, FIP, K percentage, walk percentage, really improved in the second half last year.
He's he's not good.
Even when he was good in the second half, it was a 17.7% K rate, 3.8% walk rate. So it was a 115 whip, but that's a low strikeout rate. That's really deep leagues only. And I think I've always looked at Vasquez as someone that has to be at Petco for me to even think about him as a streamer.
Yeah, in the model update, he only has one pitch that's any good. It's the sweeper. And I think watching him, you're like, oh yeah, the sweeper's decent. And then the locations aren't that great on the other stuff. And, the sweeper also, over time, these guys, batters are getting better and better at seeing these, So I know he's put together an arsenal around it and he's trying to do his best. But sometimes, another thing is when you're 269, innings into a career, you can look at strikeout minus walk rates, like Derek just did. And yeah, 14.8 for his career against 8.5. It's not really tenable. He's an interesting guy to have when he has options and he's out of options. But he's an interesting guy to have as your 5th or 6th guy. I think he can sort of muddle along for a while, but I wouldn't put him on any breakout list, and I would expect an ERA more like 2024 when he had a 4.87.
Yeah, you got to be real careful. Dodging raindrops out there, I think, with Randy Vasquez in those deeper leagues. As we've been talking about all week, we are launching a 2026 Fantasy Baseball League hosted on NFBC. It is free to enter, no purchase required. It runs for the full MLB regular season. It's a skill-based contest using standard NFBC scoring. It's a 5x5 league. The top 3 overall finishers at the end of the season will win merch vouchers to the official Rates and Barrels merch store, and we'll also have individual prizes for league winners. It's going to be a voucher in the amount of a hat or a t-shirt. The store is not available now, so if you go looking for the merch store, it doesn't exist yet. We're still building it. NFC is going to host the league and handle all the scoring and standings. Thanks to Greg Ambrosius, Tom Kesenick, Jeff Stein, the whole crew over there for getting us up and running. I think we've filled something like 40 or more leagues already. So we got a lot of people that have signed up, and still some time here before the weekend to get in. Those kick off on Monday, 1 o'clock Eastern. Monday, February 16th is when those drafts start. It's NFBC 50 style, 50 rounds, 12 teams per league, no in-season pickups, twice a week lineup changes. So you can get the sign up link for that in the show description. And you can also join our Discord in there as well. Conversation is going around the clock. It's a good way to keep up on all the news and notes, talk strategy, throw some would you rather polls in there. We got a lot of good stuff coming up. Team previews begin rolling out next week, Eno. So that is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.